Fuck. Antibodies. I don't want Pox Party to get it. I want to. It'd be really hard to have 0 vaccines. What's happening? Are you in? Are you Cup Roar? Yeah. Are you in general? Yeah. Okay. What is up?
Hello, mate. Let me just mute you on air.
Can't hear you right now, actually. Oh, my headphones are off. That's why. Hold on. Okay, speak to me.
You got me?
Yeah.
Well, that last guy was fun.
Yeah, that was something.
Was,
I think just
it. He's not injured.
what the fuck is happening?
All right, screw it. I'm just gonna.
Like my point with the Sweden stuff is just like, so while you say there's no evidence that lockdowns or not having a lockdown would have worked, there's also no evidence that like not locking down would have had the same effect that Sweden does. Does that make sense?
so, what I was referring to was a comment from. I just minimised the stream, and now all the comments have gone. But something about having a strict lockdown.
Here, I got them up. So who was it from? And
Stoner.
oh yeah, the strict lockdown. Yeah.
Yeah, and then obviously you said that might have worked, but there's no evidence to suggest that would work. Just as much as there's no evidence to suggest it wouldn't work.
I guess, but we can look at individual things where it kind of worked. It did work with Australia and New Zealand, where Australia did like the most hardcore shit imaginable, basically, and they have like extremely low, they have extremely low COVID numbers, like all around, COVID deaths and COVID numbers in general.
You can look at Sweden, who did the exact opposite, and they have very low COVID numbers.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that my point is that like basically nobody lives in Sweden and nobody goes to Sweden. Like they don't have a lot of tourism there. Whereas New Zealand is like the fucking tourism capital of the world, basically, where they get a fuck ton of tourists, especially from like a lot of nations where COVID was breaking out in. China, like a bunch of Asian countries there, Japan, stuff like that. They get a fuck ton of tourism from there. So them locking down is probably beneficial to them, like locking down hardcore, because they need to stop the tourism from getting in. Whereas Sweden probably doesn't need to do that much of a lockdown because you guys already have like super tight immigration stuff, and there's not a lot of tourism going on there. Actually, I said to you guys, I don't even know if you're from Sweden or not, but
no,
for people in Sweden, they don't have to do as much stuff because they don't have like a ton of people going in and out of the country at all times.
Okay, so I get that. I would like to say that New Zealand's population is half of what Sweden's is. So
no, I know, but
I get what you're saying about tourists.
Yeah.
So why not just lock off flights?
Well, because that wasn't their policy. I mean, like, so like.
It just seems like we're arguing about two extremes.
Yeah, I guess.
New Zealand was the furthest extreme that any country in the world went.
Yeah, and they had extremely low COVID numbers.
The least extreme that anyone went.
But we can compare the COVID numbers between the two. COVID numbers. Where the fuck is this? I hate that they stop. So like New Zealand has like 2,000 deaths. What the hell's happening in chat? I need to compare population density. And then Sweden has 20,000 deaths. So for a country that has about double the population of Australia has like 10x the deaths.
Why was it showing me the United Kingdom?
Huh?
It's all right. I'm just looking up the data, and for some reason it was showing me the United Kingdom.
Okay, yeah. So like, yeah, New Zealand has 2,000 deaths with a population of 1.9 million. Let's say just round up to 1 to 2 digits. And then Sweden has 2.6 million people, so double the population, but has 20k deaths.
Okay, let me just look at it.
And then we can look at death rate as well for the two.
That's what I was trying to do, and it shows you No, I want trends, not statistics.
But just to Stoner in the chat, it is important to look at overall numbers as well, just because it can be a
Yeah.
Like, because the rate or the what the fuck, like the death rate doesn't like super matter if we're talking about like the overall effect of the lockdown, especially in extreme circumstances. Because like here's the rate, and you can see it goes up and down, but like the rate will change based on their like mandates, basically. Like the rate is like pretty consistent, and then the rate. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Wait, Stoner, you can look at the number here. That's what total deaths are. So the rate of total deaths in New Zealand is per 1.9 million. Well, there's 2,000 deaths. Essentially, is how you can look at that if we're looking at the grand total. Whereas 2.2 to 2.6 million to 20 is a much higher rate. You doubled the doubled the population and somehow like quadrupled the deaths. Or no, 10x the deaths. Yeah, but now, Stoner, imagine you went to an island. So there's 2 islands. One island had 10 people and 1 died from COVID, and another island had 20 people and 10 people died of COVID. Well, yeah, but I'm pretty sure New Zealand's density is really high when there's tourism going around. Yeah, that's 50% and 10%. That's a huge increase, Stoner. What? Yeah, Stoner, we're in agreement here. Sweden did worse. Thanks. All right. But yeah,
Quite
anyway.
interesting actually. So obviously, New Zealand completely locked down their country. No one was allowed to do anything, so there was no spread.
Essentially, for argument's sake, let's say no spread. Yeah, sure. Because obviously there's some spread, but we're not going to get like.
Yeah, I mean there was 20 up until the 1st of this year. There was a total of 52 deaths. That was up to the start of this year. So, but in the last 9 months, so in the last 2 years, there was 51 deaths. In the last 9 months, there's been 2,100 deaths, still going up steeply.
Wait, for who?
For New Zealand.
Have they taken off their restrictions?
Yeah. When did New Zealand lift their restrictions? I know it was not too long ago.
Because they have a huge spike in deaths. Oh, is this even deaths? All-time cases and deaths. Oh, deaths are the blue lines. So wait, what the fuck is happening here? Oh, these are just cases. Where's deaths? Oh, here it is. Oh, it's just on the other slide. That's what I have here. Dumbass. Yeah, so deaths like started spiking for New Zealand mostly after August 4th, 2022, which I think is when they started releasing their restrictions.
August this year, was it?
August 4th of 2022 is when like things start picking back up again. Because I think most places now don't have restrictions anymore. So like Sweden's curve is kind of like mostly the same because they never changed anything, right?
Yeah.
There's not like a huge spike besides like the beginning when everything was fucked up, right?
Yes, it's been very steady ever since.
Yeah, and then New Zealand's is like pretty steady, and then there's a little bit of a spike, but maybe we could just all call this steady, and on their things. So like in terms of rate, not much is different. So we kind of have to look at we can look at the rates, and they're both kind of like similar graphs. It's just kind of opposite, I guess. Whereas everything's fucked at the beginning.
One was high now, one's high then.
Yeah, and
Makes
it
sense.
would be
Yeah.
interesting to look into if that's because New Zealand went into tight lockdowns really early, like right away, and Sweden didn't, so they had their bump early, and now New Zealand's getting their bump late because COVID's over, but their bump is slightly less bad because we have a way less deadly COVID variant now. Like New
Yeah,
Zealand got
it's
hit
the
with the
same.
deadly variant, or sorry, Sweden got hit with the deadly variant, so a lot more people died, and then New Zealand got hit with the what we have now, which is like not deadly at all. And then obviously we can also look at like overall cases.
So, so who are we looking at here? Sweden had 2.6 million. New Zealand had 1.9 million. So in that case, Sweden actually had less confirmed cases.
What do you mean? In terms of what?
As a percentage to the population.
Oh yeah, probably.
Because New Zealand have had.
But the main because we're looking at then we would need to get into hospitalizations because the reason why I'm using deaths more as the numbers because most likely you were in the hospital before you died. Or at least you should have been in the hospital, and that's like the main. That's like the main problem with COVID is I don't really care how many people get infected and then get better if they weren't in a hospital. The main issue with COVID is how much it fucks our hospitals up.
But then you'd have to look at the ages.
The what?
The average age of the population.
Yeah,
the older
but
you are, the more susceptible you are to COVID. The younger you are, the less susceptible you
are. Sure.
Not susceptible in terms of getting it, but in terms of dying from it. The elderly are more vulnerable than the younger.
Yeah, yeah. But what does this have to do with each? Then let's say we grant this, right, and it turns out that New Zealand has a much older population than Sweden. Then wasn't it justified for New Zealand to lock down fully then?
100%.
Yeah. Okay. Because I think both of our points, I feel like we technically agree. We're just kind of getting into weird spots where it's just each country has their different policies, and it seems like Sweden's worked, but we don't know if that would have worked in the United States or Canada, and New Zealand's worked, and it worked really fucking well, but we don't know if that would have worked in other places. Also, you have to look out for public perception, and New Zealand mostly just has to deal with tourism more than they have to deal with anything else.
I think you have to look at it from an economic standpoint as well. Could countries as big as the USA, the UK, be able to be shut down completely for that long and not crash economically?
Well, the debate, potentially that could be one, but the other question you have to ask yourself is how long will people be stuck in hospitals, and are hospitals being so fucked up, and how much does that affect us economically? Because that's more of the justification why shutdowns were instituted, is because oh, okay, we have our hospitals being totally overrun right now, and people are dying. This isn't good.
So what's this you're looking at now?
I was looking at just population, so I was going to go to Sweden and New Zealand, but I looked up the total population, so it's going to take me a while to get there. I was seeing every country. So what, New Zealand's 5 million? What, Sweden is 20 million?
New Zealand.
Oh, it's 10 million. Anymore. But again, okay, so so even that, so they have double the population and double the cases. So I think, this is a weird stats thing, but it's representative. So half. So
they've got 2.6 million in Sweden, and give or take 1.9 million.
Yeah. So that's about half as much cases and half as much population. That's about the same ratio, right?
Yes, I think we've kind of come to an agreement that neither of us are right and neither of us are wrong.
Yeah. Well, I think we come to an agreement that different places have different mandates, and we can't really tell which mandates are good for what. But we know that heavy lockdowns do work, and we know that maybe not having as severe lockdowns could have also worked. But it's hard to tell, and I'd rather stay on the safe side and say that lockdowns are like the better thing to do, because I'd rather not be in a scenario where we don't do anything and then it turns out that we get totally ass fucked and we can't go back. Whereas with lockdowns, you know, if it turns out that lockdowns don't work, you could always just take off the lockdowns. And, you know, we might have some economic struggles because of that, but at the same time, we would have been way worse economic struggles if everyone fucking died, right? Or like a lot of people. Yeah, a lot of people get fucked up.
Everybody dying is, I mean,
it's a little bit extreme. Yeah, maybe I'm using too like big of words, but like essentially that's like the estimates were, so the estimates at the very beginning with us doing nothing would be that we would get 2 million deaths in the United States, and the United States is at 1 million with everything they did. So to me that shows that like, oh, maybe lockdowns are like pretty okay because it like helped us reduce those deaths. I don't know what the economy would look like with 2 million people dead. Well, Stoner, the problem with locking down only at-risk people...
It could be worse than it is at the minute.
Sorry, go ahead.
I said it's scary to think that the economy could be in a worse case than it is at the minute.
Yeah, but 2 million people magically leaving the workforce and a bunch of people being in hospitals and places having to close down because all of their workers... Like, at the beginning of the pandemic, there's a Honda plant near me, and it has like 300 plus workers. And that's a lot for where we are. That's a really big business, and they had to close down for like a month because there's just people getting sick over and over and over again. Like the whole factory got like sick in like one day. Like everyone was just sick, and they just had to close down for the entire duration basically because too many people were sick and gone. And most people who work there aren't like old people, but like, you know, you're not gonna work while you're like sick with a virus. So like, yeah, like this kind of goes back into what Stoner's saying. Like Stoner's saying we should only lock down at-risk people. That doesn't really help at-risk people because now you're gonna just have to keep them locked down forever while the virus just keeps going on for people outside, right? Like the virus isn't gonna go away magically just because we lock down only at-risk people. So those at-risk people are gonna have to be locked down forever. And then letting young adults work, to what I just brought up, that doesn't really help because now you have a bunch of people, like if we do nothing, and then a bunch of people will leave the workforce for like 2+ weeks at a time, or however long COVID lasts without vaccines and without mandates. Anyways, like if we do nothing, we just don't have any vaccines basically, then how long people are out of the workforce is like a really big problem because you have like these people en masse. Like if one person gets infected at your workplace, it's good to assume that everyone's going to get it, and then everyone's going to be off work at this one business for 2 weeks, let's say, probably more, because of like how many people are gone at a time won't be consistent. So then that whole business is closed, and for a place like the Honda plant near me, that's like that's a big deal.
But during lockdown, it was closed anyway.
Yeah, but the hope is that the lockdowns make it so that it's closed for less time, and we can have what we did, where we have like a slow kind of gradual reintroduction into the workforce, and you can kind of control your spiral instead of doing nothing, and now like randomly shit's fucking happening and you have no control over it.
I would argue if people had time off because they were ill, would result in them opening a lot sooner than lockdown finishing.
This is technically another thing that we have like no evidence for, but it's possible. But lockdowns, at least for where I am from, in like Ontario, they didn't really. At the beginning, there was like that month, basically, I guess, or a couple months where people weren't working. But I'm not sure how much that had to do with our economy currently. Our economy currently is in shambles for other reasons, other than like the shutdown that happened before. I think you can post links, Stoner. If not, then just type in chat that you got instantly banned. Oh, that worked.
I'm trying to find some stats that I'm really struggling to find.
Yeah, no worries. Earlier debate. Well, this doesn't help me now, Stoner. What is this? What are you linking me this for, Stoner? Just so I can, instead of me reading the whole thing.
Oh, because of the kids, probably.
Oh, it's saying that like, okay, people who are older are more at risk than long COVID than kids are, I guess. I don't know how much that had to do with, I forget what I was saying, I guess, but who's affected the most, yeah. Typically, anyone who's older will get more affected by COVID. But my point when bringing it up was like, long COVID's still a problem, and like long COVID's one of the only things that young people have to deal with COVID. Because like, you might get COVID and you might feel nothing, and then suddenly you're tired for like a year plus, if not more. That's like not to be anecdotal, I guess, but I know people that are that, or they're just like dead tired. I think that's the story right now with Sidney Crosby, a professional like one of the best hockey players of all time, and he was like for the past year, like all of last year, he was just not playing the same because he was just dead fucking tired all the time.
Okay, that makes no sense to me.
If you go to hospitals, well, not in Canada, to be fair. Anyone can go to hospitals in Canada. So
where's the hospitality rate depending on age? Is what I'm looking for.
hospitality rate. If it was just coded for poor people. Well, to be fair to your point, I think in the States there's a higher propensity to distrust hospitals by minority groups, specifically black groups, because of some of the fucked up shit the United States did in the past. Yeah,
Okay,
true.
so let's go with the UK then.
Sure.
Let's have a look. So, rate of people under 65.
What stat you're looking for? I'll help you look for it.
Here we go. What's this? I don't trust half of this data.
Now you're turning into the guy I just had on. Don't turn into mouth. Don't distrust every piece of data I throw at you.
I'm not distrusting every piece. The reason I find it so hard to believe some of the data is the way that it was reported at the beginning. Like the death rates at the beginning, how massively inflated they were.
Okay, so on this point, you're wrong on it, because what they did. So this was like a big talking point at the very beginning. But how they gathered that data? Huh? Sorry, go ahead.
Any death that had. So if you died and you had COVID, you were being counted as a COVID statistic.
Yes, but they went back on all of those and checked them after and changed the numbers accordingly. So those, what you're talking about, when they mark it down as a COVID death, those never made it to like the stats websites, whatever the fuck. It was, you would get, a doctor would, so what would happen is that you would go to the hospital, you would die, you would have COVID, they would mark it as patient died with COVID. That would then go somewhere else, and then during the autopsy of that dead body, if it was allowed or whatever the fuck, they would then see, or based on whatever the fuck information they have at the hospital / like an autopsy or some stuff like that, they would then determine cause of death, and then that, if that was COVID, if they marked that as COVID, then that would go to the stats.
Right. So what you're missing there is the vast majority of people who die do not have an autopsy.
Yeah, but none of those were marked as COVID deaths, I don't think. Or if they were, they might have been marked as, like, there's like a separate stat that goes around that might have been more, it's like deaths with COVID is the other stat that you can look at. But that's deaths with COVID, not deaths due to COVID. %20 is a big game changer, just an FYI star. But yeah, usually they end up adjusting the numbers. Like, for most people, what most people say is that the numbers at the very beginning up until now are heavily underrepresented, because a lot of people don't go to the doctor. A lot of people don't know if they have COVID or not. They're just like, oh, I'm sick with something, I'm going to stay home. And a lot of times when people die, they just don't have time to check if it was a COVID death or someone dies at home or like whatever.
Patients in hospital.
I think I see what you're saying, Stoner, but yeah.
Yeah, see, it's like the 26th, 24th of January. Right, now this is where I find things very difficult to believe. So, it's saying patients in hospital were 29,416. Of them, 20,000. Sorry, what? Oh, okay, I just misread the fact. Don't matter.
No worries.
Yeah, ignore that. I completely misread that.
No worries. Yeah, typically those numbers like there's a lot of, from what I've heard from like anyone that I know with stats or like looked up stuff for like stat stuff, like a lot of stats people get really pissed off when people like do this stuff because they just don't know how much effort goes into collecting data, even data for like COVID deaths. And it's not as simple as just like a doctor puts a note in his notebook and then they mark that as a COVID death. And then that goes on like the big board of like COVID deaths. There's a little bit more to it to justify, to make sure that it was actually a COVID death. And then those numbers go back later and then get readjusted again. And stuff like that. That's why sometimes you can see like, that's why usually when you see with the deaths, it's like a day-to-day thing. It's like per day instead of like a live counter throughout the day. It'll just be like at the end of every week or something like that. That's why they usually show weekly stuff, because at the end of every week, then they'll post their data because they're still checking all that stuff throughout the week.
Yeah, so we had it on a daily basis in the UK. Every day the Prime Minister would come on and have his speech and talk about the deaths.
We're not limited to just COVID, but like we're kind of on that COVID topic right now. If you want to bring something else up, we can talk about it. It's just let this conversation kind of end first. Stoner.
So in England, there was 52 excess deaths a week over a 5-year average. So
yeah. So that's an important, like excess deaths is an important one to look at because that's a good judge of like how many people might have actually died from COVID, because like you look at your excess deaths instead of your standard deaths. And excess deaths have always been like a lot higher than any previous year.
What's that? Okay. I've just put in 5-year death rate and it's given me the US dollar to pound exchange rate.
Jesus.
Good old Google.
I'm so glad that it's funny that you say like, good old Google. I'm so glad that at least the guy that I was talking to before doesn't like disbelieve Google. I've had too many of those discussions where like I'll Google something and I'm like, here's like a bunch of links to stuff, and they're like, you got that link from Google. It's like, oh my fucking god.
Yes, I mean, don't get me wrong. Some of the stuff I read, I tend not to believe, because I do think there's a big agenda in regards to control from the government.
Well, if that's true, then why isn't anyone like whistleblowing on it that would be heavily incentivized to do it? Imagine if Russia could prove that the United States, Canada, the UK, and all of us are like actually just controlling our population so heavily. Like, why isn't like people like China and Russia like screaming from the rooftops about this stuff? And Russia even has their own vaccine. Not to say that you're like a vaccine denier, but they get on other stuff. Like they have their own vaccine. They're heavily incentivized to like leak and like talk shit about us in the most ways, but they don't do it. They don't, they're not like whistleblowing that we're like controlling everyone. Mostly because it'd be really hypocritical on their part. But
so from controlling, I don't believe this government. I believe it's above the government. But I mean, they decide, like the global
none of these
elite.
fucking Pelosi memes you're talking about are true.
They will decide what happens.
You guys are all wrong on this. It wasn't a fucking gay lover shit.
I mean, I'll take Biden's election.
Yep.
The laptop that was suppressed.
Well, the laptop was quote unquote suppressed because the data found on the laptop was illegally obtained. So any article that linked to the data that was on it, like any of the photos and stuff like that or whatever was on there, that had to get deleted and removed from whatever it was published on because that was illegally obtained stuff. But you could still post like pieces talking about it. You just couldn't link to any of the stuff that was found on the laptop. So there's a lot of articles of people talking about it, but any articles that linked to the data on the drive had to be removed.
When it was leaked, it was leaked by the New York Times, I believe, and it was deleted from Twitter. They then had their Twitter account banned for 2 weeks.
Yeah, because what they linked, because what they linked to, what they showed linked to the stolen drive, like what was on it. Like even if you grabbed a photo from it, you would get your post deleted. Like not a photo of it, but like a photo from the drive. So like there's like that one photo of Hunter Biden like naked or whatever the fuck. That's like an illegally obtained photo or whatever.
So you don't believe social media suppress one side of an argument ever?
Typically they don't. I mean, I haven't seen any evidence that they have done that in the past about certain things.
Uh,
Now, what I have seen is that usually, like, quote unquote Republican candidates or like Republican voters, they'll get suppressed mostly because they're like saying like deplorable shit that gets them banned.
so no, it's anyone who disagrees with the current agenda.
No, it's typically not. You can post right now about whatever the heck it is, as long as it's not like wildly
Because
disinformed, I
because
guess.
I'm nobody.
Well, I know,
Because
but like you just said anybody, so it's not anybody, I guess. It is anybody, just not like high value people, but those people have a what I say by high value, I mean like, like people with a lot of influence. Those people have a higher standard to follow. And if they're just reporting on known false like facts, then they get like restricted. Or actually, these days they don't even get restricted. They don't get anything banned. They just have a thing underneath it that says this has been fact checked by Twitter or whatever. Usually you can still say the story. It'll just say that it's been fact checked.
I mean, I will use this as an example. Andrew Tate getting banned off everything.
Yeah, that was probably weird, but like again, so with social media platforms like YouTube and Twitch, I don't know if that's more like censoring a narrative, more of just like public opinion didn't want this person on this platform because they thought what they were doing is like really bad. Now I agree that like Andrew Tate probably didn't need to get banned from things, but like Twitch and YouTube have their TOS, and it's kind of on purpose broad and weird and finagly specifically for this kind of capability. So I just like I agree that YouTube and Twitch can ban whoever they want for whatever reason, but I don't think that's to the level of like suppressing certain stories to benefit one side over the other. I think they just ban whatever's not popular. Essentially, that's why you don't get banned for like except for the I'm not gonna say it because it's on Twitch, but the slur for white people that Hassan said, that'll get you banned now because there's enough public outcry about it. But if I could say a bunch of things about white people and not get banned
Oh, you can't
because no one cares about it.
spell it because I don't actually know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's you put cheese on it. I'm sure I could technically say I just don't want to
That's been used for years and years and years.
Yep, I know. And then it only got Hassan banned because he said it, and it became like a problem. And that's what I'm saying. Like things on social media, like Twitch and YouTube and Twitter, usually stuff only gets banned when it's like a problem, or if it's like horrible, mischaracterizations, or like you're actually just spreading like fake news, like false facts. But yeah, like with stuff with Andrew Tate mostly just got banned because no one liked him. Essentially, it's kind of the very basic version of that.
I disagree that no one liked him. I'll say there's a.
I know.
massive
Okay, a
contingent
majority of people
population.
on the platform didn't like him, and enough sponsors were like, "That's weird." It's typically what happens.
But then it goes back to free speech, doesn't it?
Yeah, but platforms like Twitch and YouTube
And then,
don't follow free speech because they're private platforms.
mm,
And you can argue that they should follow, but then you have to get into a discussion on like, does Twitter does it need to be like a public platform that's owned by the government? And then at the same time, like now you need to have like separate Twitter pages for each country because each country has their own definition of like what free speech is. Whereas if you just leave it as a private company, then you can kind of just influence what their TOS is about.
which exactly points to the fact that these big tech companies now basically control the world because they control exactly what news gets put out.
But they don't. They usually have check and balances to kind of go against that, and usually there's a stink about like them doing that.
Okay, and anyone of note that has stood up against the elites have been banned.
Okay, well, what does that mean? You gotta be more specific than that.
Okay, Andrew Tate.
Yeah.
Sneeko.
Yeah, but they were mostly banned because of like Sneeko. Sneeko's a bad example. I'll get to him after. Sneeko literally said he would like rape somebody. So.
Right, I don't know that much about him.
Yeah. I wouldn't use Sneeko as a good example.
Oh.
Tate's a better example because Tate didn't really say anything too bad. There was just a lot of clips edited together. Not really edited together. There were clips kind of slightly taken out of context that made him look like a misogynist. And in Twitch's and YouTube's TOS, they have a rule against being misogynistic. So.
Right, but on that, he got banned from everything instantly. He had his bank account shut down.
Yes. So that isn't really more of a conspiracy. It's more of just like a domino pushing thing, or a lot of companies, they'll have like internal discussions on like, is this okay? So like if Twitch decides to ban somebody off their platform, that raises an eyebrow to YouTube to go like, oh, he banned him, oh, I'll ban him too. Fuck it, like he's gone. It's not much of like, it's not really coordinated as it is just kind of like a, you know, a domino causing a domino effect, or, you know, because somebody gets banned on one platform usually means they'll get banned from other platforms. Because if Twitch bans Andrew Tate for misogyny, well, it probably falls underneath the same problems on the same TOS as YouTube. Like, it falls under the same rules because they have similar TOSs. So there's also banned off YouTube. And if YouTube sees his ban, he's like, whoa. Another company goes, whoa, if Twitch and YouTube are banning him, I should ban him too, because I don't want sponsors coming to me and going, hey, why don't you ban this person that these two major companies didn't ban yet or have banned already? That's usually what happens. There's not like a big like coordination. It's usually just, well, when one company does something, it sends ripples through the rest of the industry, and those ripples travel really, really fast. And you don't want to be the company that didn't ban Andrew Tate, because then sponsors look at you and go, wow, you're the only company that allows misogyny on their website. I'm not sponsoring you anymore.
It's very narrow-minded, though, to say he's misogynistic.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. But that was the
public.
public. I know. I agree. But that was the public opinion of him. That's why he got banned.
I would say it was a leftist public opinion.
Yeah, and lefties usually are usually like in the majority on these platforms.
You had it right there.
They don't control the platforms because platforms run off of money, and the money lies with lefty people who usually use the platforms. So yeah, when lefty people are mad at somebody, it's probably going to get them banned more often than not, because more quote unquote left-handed left-minded people are on Twitch. Now for YouTube, that's a little bit different. There are a lot more, you know, right-wing people on here, but I think YouTube for banning Andrew Tate off of YouTube was a little bit more under pressure from different people, because misogyny isn't a left-right divide. When people hear misogyny on both sides of the aisle, they're kind of like, oh, get this guy off of here.
I feel like the definition of misogyny is completely different between left and right.
Yeah, you're right, the definition, but I'm saying when you hear the word. When you hear somebody called a misogynist on both sides of the aisle, you're probably like, oh, that guy's a bad person. I don't want him on my platform. And that's probably what happened to YouTube.
The word misogynist, leftist media.
Huh?
The word misogynist was put out by leftist media.
Yeah, maybe.
And leftist channels.
Sure, but that's not. You're kind of getting away from a conspiracy at that point. You're just kind of showing me that, like, yeah, public opinion was swayed by these things, maybe, but at the end of the day, Andrew Tate was more banned because of public opinion and less banned because of some deep cabal conspiracy.
So I'm not saying anything's a conspiracy.
Okay, it kind of sounds like you are, but
no, because I would have just thought it'd be common knowledge that the elites control the world. I can't see how that would be a conspiracy.
That elites control the world? That is kind of a big conspiracy.
Well, if you can control how people think, do you not, to an extent, control the world?
Yes, but the argument is, do they control how people think?
Yes.
How?
Masks.
How is that
controlled? You must wear masks. You must not wear masks.
Oh yeah, but wait. We live in a democracy. If enough people disagree with it, we wouldn't have had mask mandates.
If enough people weren't, as I said earlier, slave-minded?
Yeah, but they're not slave-minded. We were given a lot of information about how masks works, and there's a lot of information out there that shows that masks do work. The slave-minded is on the opposite side, where people who think that masks are completely and utterly ineffective. But there's been a lot of show that masks do have an effect on like COVID spread.
I mean, to give another example, is, let's say, the way that I have heard how the world described makes a lot more sense to me than.
I'll get to your stuff after Stoner and
side of the argument, I suppose.
Because it's a totally different topic than this, but I'll talk about it.
So in terms of we're slaves to the people who make money.
Kind of. Actually, no. I'm going to totally disagree on that. Just to be more, people who make money are slaves to us because we give them money. You can see this. You can see this appear with like Adidas and other companies who ditch who get like a lot of flack, and their stocks plummet heavily because it turns out that they're like using sweatshops in the other in other places. So
Right,
there's
so that's
the stocks take a big hit. Or Adidas drops Kanye because public opinion's like, fuck Kanye, this guy's a anti-Semite. So then Adidas and stuff like that drop him.
right. So you're on about companies.
Is that not how you're talking about with money?
No,
Well,
I'm
companies
talking
make
about.
big people money. Or are we talking
Yeah,
about like the Rothschild shit or fucking
I'm
Klaus Schwab stuff?
talking the big banks.
Uh,
The fact that big banks can make money out of thin air.
well, banks don't make money out of unless, of course, you're talking about like national banks, even though they're control of monetary policy for
So do you know how the Federal Reserve works? Federal Reserve banking.
for the world or for like the United States.
Just say the United States.
Sure, typically like they're the ones who control like the monetary policy of countries, so they will increase in like for today's example, they'll increase the price of loaning and like the interest rate so that they can curb inflation. And the leaders of usually those banks are appointed by the government, but they're usually separate entities, so that
Okay.
the government isn't meddling with everyone's money.
So these banks can lend money that doesn't exist.
Kind of, but
It's not kind of. They literally can.
well, it doesn't exist in the sense that it's not like physical dollars, but like it exists on a book
So they
somewhere, and they will get the money, and they will have like actually further define what you mean by they can loan money that doesn't exist.
Okay. So let me quickly find the exact rate. I'm pretty sure they can lend $10 for every $1 they have.
What is that, like $10 for every $1 they have physically at the bank? Because that's probably true because they can back that money by other things. So it's the same way like when you go to the bank, when you put your money in the bank, like a normal bank, if you put your money in that bank, there's a reason why you can't take out like all of your money at once. It's because the bank has like taken part of your money and moved it somewhere else so they can do stuff with it as like a payment for you using the bank. So like your money is never 100% there.
Here we go. Just want to find out what the exact. Is it whenever I'm not looking for something, I can find it instantly.
Yeah. Don't worry. I know the pain.
Just the reserves. There we go. Yes, I mean, it doesn't give me the ratio, but this basically explains it. So let's say Joe puts this is the Federal Reserve Bank starts off with $0. It's just opened, and Joe.
Wait. This is a weird. We can't really start with a federal bank, like the Federal Bank of Canada or something. It can't start with $0. We know that's not like.
I mean, it did at some point.
Yeah, it start at some point when we started moving physical, but actually it didn't because it was backed by gold. So it had its value in gold. Is how it would like divvy out money.
Yeah, but okay, let's use it on.
So like for a modern example, when we came off the gold standard and went to fiat currencies to be able to control our currency better, what that typically means is that like the Bank of Canada / the Canadian government can, or the United States or the UK, whatever, anyone who has a centralized banking system and fiat currency, we can kind of control our monetary policy more so that we have more control over our like our shit when shit gets fucked. So a good example of this is Greece, while it was dealing with all of its fucking corruption and all of its shit, and had like a horrible economy, couldn't help itself get out of that struggle, because even if it's balanced the books in terms of corruption and got rid of a bunch of people and like made their country a little bit better, they don't have monetary control over their money. They have the euro, so they can't control that because Brussels controls that. And that's like one of the big kind of stops for people joining the EU. One of their big questions is like, hey, I can't control my monetary policy if I join you. How do I know that you're going to keep me secure? And then usually like the EU has like a bunch of things like, oh no, we're going to do this or do this, do this. So you don't have to worry about it. The euro is so that we can control like everything. But the UK got their special deal because they didn't have to follow that until they left the EU. But every like countries that have their own monetary policy, like Canada, United States, and the United Kingdom, when we fall into bad times, we can change the value of our currency instead of it being backed by gold to help dig us out of these troubling times. Is like, so when, if you're talking about like a bank that's like starting from scratch or whatever, that doesn't really exist anymore, obviously. But to try to tie this into what you're saying, like I would assume that you're going to say that like the banks control stuff, or the banks control us because they can control like our inflation rate by just printing more money and like making things go crazy. But the whole point of the banking system is that it's a check, or like it's a check on the Canadian government, and then the Canadian government can be a check on it, and then the people underneath it are like a check to the bank. Like, obviously, the bank isn't going to just control people like by massively increasing inflation on its own, because then people will just say, fuck you, we're not using your currency anymore, you're a corrupt piece of shit. And that's kind of what happened in Greece. And like, and places like I don't know, anywhere else that has corruption.
I mean, everywhere in the world has corruption.
Yeah, sure, but we have different levels of corruption.
Every government.
I would say that the Western world has the least amount of corruption out of anyone, and Canada specifically has one of the least like rates of corruption of any nation. But like, it seems like you think like, from what it sounds like to me, you're kind of in a mindset that people like we're all being kind of controlled by upper powers, and I guess my point is that like, well, no, because we live in democracies, we have the power to change that. And the current world as it is more a reflection of us instead of a reflection of like the elite. That makes sense?
Even democracies are fixed.
They're not, but I would be curious how you think so.
Wasn't there something in the US about something or other fixing?
Yes. So none of that has been proven to be an actual effect on the United States election systems. There have been attempts. Russiagate was such attempt where there were like massive Twitter accounts with 100+ K followers that were literally just ran by Russian agents. But those didn't end up having an effect on the election itself in the terms of like counting ballots. And with the most recent election, there has been no evidence so far that any of the ballots counting, like none of the ballots are fucked with, and any ballots that get found out to be fucked with are promptly dealt with, and those people are, you know, if they can be found, are charged and dealt with. And so there's been no tampering on the election itself. There's been attempts, and lots of them, but they never go through.
I'm not into what would you call it, politics. So I'm not right and I'm not left. I don't care.
Sure, yeah, sure.
But I suppose my argument is, I don't know. Sorry, the missus just got home. I lost my train of thought now.
You were saying that your point is like, so we were talking about corruption in governments and how you think that every government's corrupt, and then I had mentioned that like elections in the West have never been fucked with, besides all the attempts.
So, sort of going back to my previous point on how I believe we're all slaves to the system, is if we go to work, we work for money.
Mm-hmm.
If the elites can print money,
who are the elites that can print money? The only elites that can print money are the central banking systems in each nation, which are heavily regulated and appointed by us, the people, through our government. But the government is a separate entity from those because they're appointees and they're meant to be separate. So the Bank of Canada, while the head of the Bank of Canada is appointed by the government has no power to control the Bank of Canada, and the Bank of Canada's like, you know, control over our monetary policy is solely trusted to them. But they are at the behest of us. Their whole job is to be in our best interest, is to do everything in our best interest, separated from the government.
So you don't believe if someone can get richer by doing something unethical, they will do that?
No, they will 100% do that, but that's why we have regulatory bodies that stop them from doing that. And the regulatory bodies also apply to like the Central Bank of Canada. And so that's why we have very low corruption. It's because those regulatory bodies work really well.
I don't know. I think money talks.
Money does talk. For
I mean,
sure.
imagine if you had a game. Are you Canadian?
Yes.
Okay, let's say ice hockey then.
Yeah.
And there was no referee in that game.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say the winner of that game got $1 million.
Sure.
Would there be cheating in that game?
Probably, yeah. There's no ref in the game. Well, it wouldn't be cheating because there's no ref to enforce the rules.
No, you're still supposed to play by the rules.
Oh, okay. Is it televised at all, or is it just like a game between the people on the ice?
Nope, just a game between the people on the ice.
Okay. So then there would probably be cheating, yeah.
So why would it change when there's even more money involved? Even
Well,
higher
because
up
it
than...
changes because now there's eyes on the ice rink and there's eyes on the game, so we can see if that ice game is being played fairly, and we can, as like the citizens of the nation, like so if the ice hockey game is the elites fucking with money, then we are the people in the stands, and we as the people in the stands are demanding that the ice hockey game be played with refs on it so that they can enforce rules and they have power, and that is the government, right? Basically, let's say, and then the government or those refs those refs are more likely the Bank of Canada, which is appointed by the Canadian government, but those refs are capable of acting independently of the Canadian government's decision, but the Canadian government decisions can be like different. So Gary Bettman might be, which is the commissioner of the league, he might be the Canadian government, let's say. The refs have their own body because there's the ref PA, they have the ref union. So the refs have their own body, so they deal with their own stuff. The players have their own union, the NHLPA. And so all of those different organizations come together to play hockey in this instance, our sport. So yeah, if the game didn't have refs and didn't have anyone watching it, yeah, it would probably be cheated on. But we live in a society where everything is watched, at least at that scale, like you're talking about. Those things are watched because it all goes through our government, and all of our government stuff is public, aside from like very specific niche things that might get released later and stuff like that. So those are all public, and we can all watch. And we appointed by the people, by us, the fans. We've appointed the people who enforce the rules. So their interests are our interests are their to keep their job. Our interests have to be like taken care of. I don't know what word I was fucking going there, but so yeah, like we do play hockey, but we do have refs and we do have rules.
Seems like a very ideology. You know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no worries. I just fucked up a word on my own. Ideological?
That's the one.
Yeah.
A way of seeing everything.
I guess, but there's a bunch of like I can kind of show you how those steps work, but it would take a lot of explaining how the government works.
Yeah. No.
Because like basically the point of my thing is like, do you think that when you cast a vote, does it go to whoever you're electing?
I don't know because I don't vote.
Okay, well I suggest you
they're
start voting now.
They're both as bad as each other.
Huh?
It's literally like, which devil do you vote for?
Sure, but that's based on your public popularity. Like you might think it's choosing between two devils, but somebody likes those people. In the case of Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump in 2016 and Biden versus Donald Trump, a lot of fucking people like Biden. In Canada, you have Justin Trudeau and the Conservatives are pretty much the frontrunners because a lot of fucking people love Trudeau. It's not because there's like some weird conspiracy that they're up there. It's just that a lot of people like them.
It's actually a interesting question because I've just seen them talking about Ukraine and Russia. Do you think if Trump won the election, Russia would have invaded Ukraine?
Okay. So my answer will be that I don't think he would have invaded Ukraine because Trump would have just basically given the Ukraine over to Russia. So there would have been no invasion needed. Because there's a whole video that explains it, but there's a bunch of documents that came out that basically Trump during his time in office, Putin was getting like so much from him that essentially the reason why Ukraine wasn't invaded in the past was because Trump was like essentially letting him take Ukraine with nothing and was like destabilizing NATO. So Russia was just kind of sitting there waiting for either NATO to destabilize or for Trump to give a less of a shit about Ukraine. And he started to do that where I think Trump had said at some point, or there was a memo somewhere about Trump basically saying that like, yeah, Crimea is now a part of Russia. And like he confirmed that. Whereas the Democrat stance is that no, Crimea is part of Ukraine.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, I don't really have a viewpoint on it. It's just interesting to hear from that side of the Sort of the pond.
Yeah, no worries. It's a because like yeah, it's mostly just like Trump was
Just
kind
Trump.
of letting Putin do what he wanted to do, so there was no need to invade Ukraine because Putin was getting away with whatever he wanted to do. But in terms of Biden's presidency, while it's true that like Ukraine is probably invaded because Biden got in power, that's like technically more of a good thing because that means that Biden was like going to be harder on Putin or is harder on Putin, so Putin felt cornered.
Do you think Trump wins in 2024?
I have no idea about that one because there's about to be a huge bloodbath between him and DeSantis, and I have no idea what that's going to do to the Republican Party. My if I were to bet right now, it would be on Biden because incumbents usually win, but it's hard to say.
Okay. Oh, thank you for the chat. I'm hoping it was more pleasurable than the last one you had.
It was. We did jump to a couple topics, so we didn't stay solely on Sweden. So you lied to me, but no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I think we did it like more naturally than the last conversation. So
Yes, rather than kids are dying because of this, because the Chinese went to here and
because it came
yeah.
from a lab, even though I can't show you that it came from a lab, but trust me, bro. But I also won't trust anything you tell me, bro. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, see, that's where I feel like conspiracy theories get over the top.
Well, every time I have these discussions with people, it's usually trust me, bro. Here's my random link from random fuck place, and but if you link me anything, I'm not gonna trust it because it came from a big publication that has been standing for the past like 100 fucking years. Like, I don't know.
It'd be kind of hypocritical for me to try and go off based off everything I believe, based off stats from different websites when I don't trust them, and then sort of disregard you against the same thing.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
yeah. Well, that's the whole like problem is like I bring up a thing. Well, it happened in the conversation. It was like the highlight of the whole conversation
Yeah.
was I bring up a routers article and he's like, I don't trust routers. Did you know that the guy sits on the Pfizer like board? I'm like, okay. Like, okay.
I mean, with me, I'm skeptical, regardless of what side it is, what side the argument is.
Yeah, might be healthy, but I would what's you might be falling into the same traps that you think I'm falling into because you're like too skeptical, basically.
Perhaps, yeah.
Where you're so skeptical of things, you don't like you're now like distrusting the whole like system and like how it works in the first place. Like there's a reason why CNN, Fox News, and all exist as companies and why they're so fucking massive. It's because usually they're just right on things they report, and any of their opinion pieces will probably be biased, but they're not like factually incorrect. And if they are factually incorrect, their heads will fucking roll. Like I brought up the example of CNN published an article about like something incorrect about Trump. I forget what it was, but it was something like horribly incorrect, and everyone involved with that story was fired.
Yeah, I could say maybe I'm too skeptical. Maybe you're not skeptical enough.
I mean, maybe, but I'm gonna stick by my institutions. I love them.
Which is fine. I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, they're also really important because it's kind of what our whole country stands on is institutions. But people are kind of losing that. That's why I stand firmly behind them. Because without our institutions, our country doesn't exist. So.
I think there's a reason though why people are losing faith.
Usually that reason has to do with the internet and the fact that you can post anything you want without pushback. And like so, like when the other guy I was talking to was bringing up Tim Pool, the reason why I scoffed at it was because of like, sure, Tim Pool might be recognized by whatever the fuck shit he thought like he said, but that could just be for like he even kind of said it where it was like that's just for his videos, like his news videos, but his opinion pieces, those don't fall under the same regulatory body. It's like, okay, well, when you're Tim Pool and you're the only one, there's no distinguishing. Like, I don't know how the fuck you would distinguish Tim Pool's news from Tim Pool's opinions because he presents them in the same way. You come out on a video and go, I'm gonna predict a 49 state landslide for Trump, and then he's dead fucking wrong, and he's like, whoops, I guess I was wrong on that one. But there's there's no difference between Tim Pool's quote unquote opinion pieces and difference between and his like news. And I have no idea how that like certification process works in the first place. I have a sneaking suspicion you can get that because you post things that are news, and then so you get that like, and then those, because you have that certification, whatever body that is will check your news articles and like flag you if they're not accurate or something. Anyways, this is really off topic, but
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying though.
yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for the chat. You had made me think.
Yeah, thanks to you too.
Which
Actually,
is always my goal when I'm speaking to someone.
yeah. Well, it's my goal too, is to convert you to the dark side.
I can't see that happening. But you never know.
You never know. I might just like
Never
start
say
fucking
never.
with your money. I'm actually the deep state. Okay, just letting you know that. Anyways, yeah,
No,
good chat.
thank you for the chat, and I will hopefully speak to you again soon.
Yeah, no worries. Anytime you want.
Cheers,
Just
mate.
scream at me.
Yeah, no worries, dude.
All right. Well,
Cheers. See you later.
see ya. All right, Stoner and DFK. What the fuck are you guys talking about? You fucking wild. You wild people.